All right, so before we get into actually taking a look at different plan sets, I kind of want to just spend a few moments and talk about how plans are developed at a very high level. So, what happens when a owner or developer has a piece of property that they want to develop? They have to go through a series of processes, and primarily it's getting the right permits. A plan has to be created, and this could come in the form of multiple different plan types, and then you have to get all the permitting. So, typically, a step one, if it requires federal permits, federal review, an environmental impact statement will have to be done, and that basically is checking for the feasibility or what issues that this project may cause to the environment. Upon completing that and getting the right permits, then you go into the next phase, which is possibly a rezoning variance. And what that means is properties out there are zoned are given a certain designation for zoning. So farms would be an agricultural designation. Your subdivision would be a residential. Your malls, shopping areas would be commercial. And if you were to, doing a subdivision, most subdivisions probably came from what was once farmland, and that farmland has to be rezoned to residential. If you're going to put a shopping mall on that farmland or that piece of property and it's zoned agricultural, has to be rezoned to commercial. So you have to go through that process. If you don't have to rezone it, the process is actually a little bit easier. You can go right into creating a concept or in a plan, and then you go through planning and zoning commission hearings and whatnot. The other area in step two that may happen is projects may need to be subdivided. So if you've got a 100-acre piece of property and you want to divide it into 100 equal acre lots, then you have to go through a subdivision process. And that subdivision process is taking the larger piece of property and dividing it into smaller pieces. On a commercial lot, sometimes you have out parcels, they call them, where you've got your main property, but then you've got some out parcels for some other buildings. So like maybe you got a Walmart, and then the out parcel might be where the restaurant is, or the Starbucks or the gas station. So you have to go through an entire process to get that approved. And typically the owner hires a civil engineering and planning firm, and they help the owner go through this maze of the process. And then obviously step three, once you get it approved, then you go out to construction. And when you go to construction, you got to get, in some cases you might have to get money or bonding. You may have to do some other independent impact. You have to pay certain fees, and then you obtain your grading and other permits, and then you construct it and you sell it, right? So that's basically what happens, in a very high level explanation. To do this, too, something else to consider if we take a look at this is that there's an associated cost of development. So when you're developing a piece of property, you want to sell that piece of property, you want to make sure that you're going to make money on it. That's the whole point of developing property. And usually what happens is the engineer goes through a checklist. And if you look at this checklist here, this worksheet, you'll see that there's a lot of different parts and pieces. So if you look at removal of hazardous materials, or hard soil removal or rock removal, grading, drainage, slope control, retaining walls, all those things are factored in when they're doing a preliminary plan. So there's an idea, there's a plan, but for the engineer to actually look at that information, they have to kind of evaluate the site. They have to know what's on the site, what may be under the site, so they may need some soil test. So some of this work is either a best guess, or it's just from history, or they've got some type of record data, typically from GIS data. Now with certain technologies like UAS, they could apply that technology to determine what's going on. And this is the same information that's going to happen, or a lot of this information is going to come when a contractor goes to bid it. So you'll see this stuff come back into a takeoff, where you're going to get a little bit more finer number. But at their very onset, the owner is going to know or have an idea what the property is going to cost to develop. You'll notice you're going to see a couple little icons as I drop on each slide. UAS or Stratus and Sight Vision. I put those here because I want to relate Trimble technology to the workflow of this entire process. And those are two types of technology that could be applied at this stage. You could go fly the site with a drone, get some preliminary topo, see what's on the site, because if it's a large property, you can't walk 100 acres. Having a drone flight would be applicable for something like that. Same thing with Sight Vision. You could go out and use Sight Vision to just maybe measure some key points. Maybe if you had a quick sketch that you could throw in there as a model, you could see what that model or building might look like on a site. So again, just kind of giving yourself a visual as, what's this going to look like? Would it be possible? So again, just a couple, there's probably more, but those are a couple that come to mind, with the CC division here and with SciTech and your customers. After, they determined, this is feasible, what do we do next? So a lot of this, again, I'm not going to go through this whole spreadsheet or this whole slide here, but these are just some of the things that they have to do. And a lot of it sometimes is identifying what the neighbors are. So I probably should have put Sight Vision on here as well, because Sight Vision would be a good tool to go sell the neighbors. So the owner and the engineer could be out there and showing the adjoining neighborhood what this project may look like, what the entrance might look like, what it would look like from a certain street or somebody's property. Again, drone data, aerial imagery. You can see typically they'll do this nice rendered sketch plan to sell the concept to not only the county but to the neighboring community. So again, this would be the next step. It's a site plan that would be typically put together, and it's usually to scale in some form or fashion. It's not always exactly what it's going to look like, but with technology today, like modeling technology, bring SketchUp, you can bring it into like I said, Sight Vision, and go show people what the site could look like. So a very good selling tool. Now you get into the actual construction sequencing. So once the project's been approved, you've got your land use, your zoning, your subdivision. That may be the first step. Delineating some wetlands, doing any demolition that's required, and then you're going to get into your rough grading. You're going to grade, the right of way, put in your storms. A lot of different steps throughout that construction process, and and here again, Trimble technology, of course, is going to work through many different aspects of the construction sequencing. So whether it's Works Manager, whether it's Business Center, whether it's SiteWorks, Earthworks, you may need groundworks for doing some, stabilization or retaining walls or piles, maybe drilling certain aspects of drilling and blasting. This is where we fit probably the most of the technology, and it's going to fit into this construction sequencing. So if we take a look at, again, high level of the very high level workflow, is the owner, civil engineer, is going to put together a set of plans on a project. And again, this is where, Sight Vision Connect could come into play. They're going to go out, send the surveyor out to do the boundary survey if needed. In most cases it is. They're going to do their design topo. This is where Business Center fits in, and other Trimble geospatial technology, whether it's the scanning technology or even SiteWorks, could be used in this application in some cases. And then it's going to go to the civil engineer. The civil engineer is going to design it. This is where I put in, again, Trimble Business Center, Sight Vision, Trimble Connect would be applicable to an engineer. And then obviously out to the construction surveyor for construction. So again, your Business Center, Earthworks, and SiteWorks. So that's the high level path of a project. And with that, what I want to get into is focus on some of the types of plans that match up to that workflow. So when a surveyor goes out and does the boundary survey, a boundary survey is typically a plat, and it's published, it's signed, and it's done by a professional land surveyor, and it's typically on file in the county records. What this does is this tells the property owner where the property lines are, who owns it, who the adjacent owners are. Primarily in this case, a boundary survey is just that. It's just your property boundary. So if you were doing a construction in here, in most cases, your limited disturbance is going to be a certain offset or distance from the property line based on, what requirements the county puts on, development of this piece of property. Also easements. So there might be some easements on here where it might be a utility easement or an underground, sewer line easement. And in those cases, that easement, most things cannot be constructed on that easement unless you get a variance or some type of change in the record. In addition to that, there's what's also known as an ALTA survey. An ALTA survey is a little bit more detailed. It typically shows the improvements on a project. In this case, it's pretty detailed with a lot of information, and there's actually a ALTA standard by the American Congress on Surveying and Mapping, and jointly by the Land Title Association. So it's a set of standards as to how these plats and these ALTA surveys are documented and what goes on them. So like I said, they show property lines, ownership, adjacent owners, and again, done by a professional surveyor. It's required to be signed and sealed accordingly. Another survey or type of survey that's done is an original condition survey, or a pre-designed topo, they may call it. This is primarily or typically done when you're doing a boundary survey. So when a surveyor goes out there, so they don't have to go out to the site twice, they'll do the boundary. They'll set out, when they set out and they do the boundary, they usually set out control. So that's a lot of where the control on a site may come from the original survey. And that surveyor will also topo and create a topo map, and they'll collect any existing data that's out there. So in most cases, the topo is going to show existing conditions, ground elevations, contours, and typically spot elevations. So I put business center in here because business center can be used to do this. It can be used to do any of the other three previous plats and maps that I showed you. It basically does this type of drawing with title blocks and surfaces and creates the contours. And again, we'll get into more of this as we get into more of the plan sets. Then in the design phase, you get a set of design plans, and those are what we're gonna talk about here shortly. It's created by typically a professional civil engineer. When these plans are initially put together, they're put together by CAD software. They're typically noted somewhere on the plans that they're not approved for construction. They're primarily used to get the approval through the county or the state or the feds, whatever approvals they need. These are really approval plans. So a lot of times the data on these plans may not be fully detailed enough for construction, which is where we get into having a construction set of documents. Most engineers are going to use Civil 3D or Bentley MicroStation or Carlson, Civil Survey. Business Center can also be applicable here. So if this is where a Business Center could fit into this part of the design, and create this design set. And the design set basically is showing all the details. And we're going to get into that here in a few minutes. Then you've got the construction plans or bid documents. So these are the plans that from the previous design set, these are going to be modified and set for approval for bid. So these are the ones that are going to get sent out to the contractor. And when they get sent out to the contractor, they have the details and the information where the contractor can do their takeoff to determine how much cut fill they're going to need, how many rolls of silt fence they're going to need, how much curb and gutter, how much pipeline, how much pavement, all the materials that site improvements and materials are going to need on that project. And these are the plans that they're going to use to create the your layout with and your 3D model, so your data prep, along with any CAD file. So depending on what phase they're in, you're first going to start with a takeoff, and then you're going to start and go into a data prep process. Usually the data prep process happens after the contractor's been awarded the project. So most contractors will do a takeoff from these plans. If they win the project, then they will get the CAD data, and they will use these plans along with the CAD data to create a 3D model or any stakeout information that they would need to go lay out the project. So that's kind of the typical process of how plans are created and some of the higher level key pieces of a plan set. In the following chapters, sections of this knowledge app, we'll dive a little bit deeper into each of these different types of plan sets to show you a little bit more detail of what the plans are and how they're used for stakeout and or takeoff.